I never thought doing laundry at 2 a.m. would turn into one of the most memorable nights of my life. But here we are. There I was, standing in the tiny basement laundry room of my apartment building, half asleep and annoyed that every other pair of socks in the world somehow decided to be dirty all at once. You know how it goes. Friday night down the drain, and instead of partying or binge watching something, I'm wrestling with a washing machine that sounds like it might take off. Classic me. Anyway, I cracked open the detergent bottle, ready to dump half of it into the machine because, honestly, I was too tired to measure. The fluorescent light flickered overhead, making the whole place feel a little surreal. Then, from the corner of my eye, I noticed movement. At first, I thought it was just a shadow or a trick of the light. But no, someone else was there. Already, at 2 a.m., I froze halfway through pouring detergent and glanced over. There was this guy sitting on the bench against the far wall, scrolling on his phone like it was the most normal thing in the world to be hanging out in a basement laundry room at this hour. He looked up just as I caught him staring and gave a small, almost apologetic smile. "Hey," he said, voice low but not uncomfortable. "Late night laundry?" I laughed nervously, shrugging. "Yeah, what else am I supposed to do? Figure out how to get a life?" I didn't really mean it like that. I was just embarrassed to be caught doing something so unglamorous. But instead of leaving, I found myself sliding the detergent bottle back onto the shelf and sitting down next to him. He introduced himself as Eli. His voice had this calm vibe, like someone who'd thought a lot about how to be perfectly chill no matter what weird situation he found himself in. He was probably a little younger than me, maybe mid-20s, with these intense green eyes that kind of caught the flickering light in a way that made me look twice. It turns out, Eli wasn't just doing laundry either. He was waiting for the guy he'd been seeing for a few weeks but who'd ghosted on him that night. He'd come down here hoping to catch a text or maybe even bump into him. I couldn't help but be drawn to the quiet desperation in his story. It was the kind of thing I'd never admit to out loud but totally understood, wanting someone to care enough to show up, even in the middle of the night. We started talking, and the night stretched on, the hum of the machines around us becoming a kind of soundtrack to this strange little bubble we'd created. Somehow, between the spin cycles and the endless drip of the faucet, I forgot all about my lonely Friday night. And by the time the last load was tumbling dry, I realized this unexpected encounter was already starting to feel like something worth holding on to. That's when the buzzer went off for his laundry, and Eli's phone finally lit up with a message. But the night wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The buzz of Eli's phone cut through the low drone of the dryers, making both of us jump a little. He glanced at the screen, thumb hovering over it like he wasn't sure if he should answer or just ignore it altogether. I could see the tension in his shoulders unwinding just a bit, but his eyes stayed a little guarded. "Finally," he muttered, swiping the screen open. I didn't ask who it was. Somehow, it felt like too much to pry. Instead, I fiddled with a loose thread on my sleeve and tried to focus on the sound of the dryer tumbling my own clothes, but I could feel the shift in the air. The message was short, just 2 words, asterisk, "Can't make it." That was it. No explanation, no apology, nothing. Eli's face tightened, something like disappointment mixed with frustration settling in. I wanted to say something, but what? That please mess? Too simple. Want to talk about it? Too clinical. So instead, I just shrugged and looked away, pretending I wasn't staring at him like I'd just stumbled into some private moment. After a beat, Eli finally looked up, meeting my gaze. "Guess I'm officially solo for the night," he said with a small, bitter laugh. "Yeah," I said softly, feeling a weird pang in my chest. "Sometimes people just disappear." He nodded, but there was something in the way he said it that made it clear this wasn't a one-off. This wasn't just about tonight. It's not the first time, and probably won't be the last. We sat in silence for a few minutes, the hum of machines filling the gaps. I thought about leaving, but something stopped me. Instead, I shifted closer, careful not to invade his space, but close enough that maybe he'd feel less alone. "I'm sorry," I said, and it felt like the most honest thing I could offer in that moment. He looked at me like I'd suddenly become the one person who actually got it. Thanks. You don't even know. We traded stories after that. Small things, nothing too heavy at first. I found out he worked at a bookstore nearby, which explained the perpetual calm about him, like he'd spent years surrounded by quiet and stories. He asked me about my job, and I gave the standard office drone spiel, but he laughed harder than I expected. "You don't sound like a drone," he said, tooling his head. "You sound like someone who's just tired of the same old routine," which, honestly, was spot on. Before I knew it, the laundry was done. Both of our clothes were tumbling dry, and the basement felt a little less like a sad pit stop and more like the start of something unknown. "So," Eli said, stretching and standing up. "What now?" I shrugged, honestly unsure. "Well, it's almost 3 a.m., not exactly prime time for bars," he smirked. "Maybe that's a good thing." We ended up walking out of the laundry room together, stepping into the quiet street where the city seemed to be holding its breath. The few streetlights cast long shadows, and the air was crisply cool. Somehow, it felt like an unscripted adventure. "Want to grab a coffee?" "There's a 24-hour place a few blocks from here," Eli offered. I hesitated, surprised by how much I wanted to say yes. Yeah, sure. Coffee at 3 a.m. wasn't a typical Friday night, but then again, nothing about this night had been typical. At the cafe, we claimed a corner table, the steamy mugs warming our hands. The place was half empty, only a couple other late-night wanderers scattered around. I found myself opening up in a way I hadn't in a while, talking about things I usually keep to myself, the kind of stuff that seemed less ridiculous when there was no one around to judge. That Eli listened, really listened, and when it was his turn, he didn't shy away either. His stories were rawer than I expected, about past relationships, the loneliness of dating in a city that sometimes felt too big and too indifferent. There was something about the way he talked about vulnerability that made me want to lean in closer, to be part of whatever story he was telling. When the first light of dawn crept through the window, I realized we'd been talking for hours. Neither of us wanted to be the first to say goodbye. "Do you want to see each other again?" I blurted out, the words surprising even me. Eli's smile was slow, genuine. "Yeah, I'd like that." We exchanged numbers, but more than that, it felt like we'd agreed on something unspoken. Like we'd stumbled into a rare moment where two people could just be real, no filters, no pretenses. I walked back to my apartment as the city woke up, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Who knew that a random late-night laundry run would lead me to this? And honestly, I couldn't wait to find out what happened next. The next few days felt kind of surreal. I kept glancing at my phone like a teenager, hoping for a text that never came right away. But when Eli did reach out, it was like this tiny spark that lit the whole week up. We started texting in that easy way where the conversation just flows without trying too hard. Memes, bad jokes, random thoughts. It was the kind of back and forth that made waiting for a reply almost fun, instead of anxiety-inducing. By Wednesday, he suggested meeting up again. This time, nothing as late or random as laundry at 2 a.m., just a regular dinner. I agreed, though honestly, it felt a little nerve-wracking. I remembered how real our first night together had been, and I guess I was worried that once the novelty of the late-night weirdness was gone, maybe the connection wouldn't be as strong. But when I arrived at the little Italian place Eli picked out, the moment I saw him waiting by the door, all that worry melted away. He looked casual but put together. Dark jeans, a simple shirt, that same calm smile that had drawn me in the first time. We talked over pasta and cheap wine, and the conversation was even better than I'd hoped. No awkward gaps, no forced topics, just that easy rhythm you get when two people are genuinely interested in each other. I found myself telling him things I rarely share even with close friends. The stuff about feeling stuck in life, about wanting something more but not knowing exactly what Eli listened like it mattered, like what I was saying wasn't just background noise. And when it was his turn, I could tell he was doing the same thing, letting down walls, sharing pieces of himself that weren't always visible on the surface. There was this moment halfway through dinner when he reached across the table and lightly touched my hand. It wasn't a big gesture, not movie-level romantic or anything, but it was enough to send a jolt through me. That small touch said so much. Comfort, interest, maybe even a little hope. I squeezed his hand back, and for a second, the noise of the restaurant faded away. After dinner, we took a slow walk through the neighborhood, the city lights casting soft glows on the wet pavement from a recent rain. The air smelled like fresh asphalt and something faintly sweet, a reminder that even ordinary nights could hold magic if you looked close enough. Eli stopped at a little park bench, sitting down like he wanted to pause, but wasn't quite ready to say goodbye. "Can I be honest?" he asked, voice low. "Please," I said. "I'm not great at this whole dating thing," he admitted with a half smile. "I get scared I'm going to mess it up or that people won't stick around." I nodded because, honestly, I felt the same way. "Maybe we're both a bit broken," he joked, "but that doesn't mean we're not worth the effort." And just like that, the walls between us felt a little lower. It was one of those moments where you realize the person across from you isn't perfect, but they're perfect for something that feels a lot more important: being real. Over the next few weeks, we settled into this rhythm that was both exciting and comforting. We explored new coffee shops, swapped playlists, and had long talks about everything from favorite childhood memories to terrible dating disasters. We even started watching the same shows and texting about the episodes, which felt so stupidly fun I couldn't help but smile every time my phone buzzed. One Saturday night, Eli invited me over to his place for dinner. I was nervous, of course. Meeting after a couple of dates is one thing, but stepping into someone's personal space felt like a whole new level of vulnerability. His apartment was warm and inviting, filled with books stacked in places that looked like they'd been curated over years. The smell of basil and garlic filled the air, and I realized he'd cooked. For me. It was simple pasta again, but somehow it felt like the nicest thing in the world. We ate, drank wine, and laughed until our sides hurt. After dinner, we sat close on the couch, the kind of close where your knees touch and you don't even notice because everything feels right. Out of nowhere, Eli reached up and tucked a stray piece of hair behind my ear. "I've been wanting to do that since the laundry room," he admitted with a shy smile. I laughed, heart pounding. "Yeah, me too." And then, finally, we kissed. It wasn't some dramatic movie-style thing. It was soft, hesitant at first, but full of everything that had been building between us. That night wasn't just about a kiss. It was about two people choosing to trust each other enough to step into something new and unknown. Lying there afterward, tangled in his arms, I realized how strange and wonderful life could be. Who would have thought that a late-night laundry run would lead me to Eli? That a random encounter in a basement could turn into this, something real, something worth fighting for. Of course, I don't know where this will go. Maybe it's just a spark that'll fade, or maybe it's the start of something unexpected. But for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm ready to find out. After that night at Eli's, things started to settle into a kind of beautiful, messy normal. We weren't those hopelessly romantic types who called each other every hour or plastered our social media with couple photos. No, we kept it real. The kind of relationship where you can binge watch shows in silence, be totally goofy around each other, and still have long conversations about the weird ways life keeps surprising you. One Sunday afternoon, Eli invited me to join him at a small poetry reading in a cafe not far from his place. I agreed, mostly because he seemed genuinely excited, and I figured it was a good chance to see another side of him. The place was cozy, with mismatched chairs and a faint smell of coffee and old paper. The low hum of whispered conversations filled the room until the lights dimmed, and a young woman stepped up to the mic. Eli squeezed my hand gently as the words spilled out. Raw, honest, and sometimes a little heartbreaking. I glanced at him then, watching his face soften in ways I hadn't seen before. It hit me that there was so much beneath his calm exterior, layers I was only just starting to understand. After the reading, Eli and I found a quiet corner and talked about what we'd heard. He told me about the nights he'd spent scribbling in notebooks, wrestling with the kind of emotions most guys try to hide. I shared some of my own stories, the ones I usually keep locked away, and for the first time, I felt like I wasn't just heard, I was seen. That weekend marked a shift. We began to open up more, not just about the easy stuff, with the fears and insecurities that usually lurk in the background. Eli admitted he was terrified of getting hurt again, and I confessed that I had spent years convincing myself I wasn't worth the kind of love we both seemed to crave. One night, after a few drinks at his apartment, Eli turned to me and said, "Do you ever think about what it'd be like if this us actually worked?" I laughed nervously because, damn, it was a big question. "All the time," I admitted, "but it scares me." He nodded, pulling me close. "Me too, but maybe fear's part of the deal." We kissed then, slower and deeper than before, like we were trying to memorize the moment just in case it didn't last. It was the kind of kiss that stayed with you hours later, the kind that makes your heart race and your mind both chaotic and calm at the same time. As the weeks turned into a month, we started meeting each other's friends. My group was a loud, sarcastic bunch who immediately took to Eli's quiet wit and easy charm. Eli's friends were a little more reserved but warm, and I liked how our worlds slowly blended, not without bumps, of course. There were moments when I caught Eli retreating, pulling back just enough to remind me that trust isn't something built overnight. One rainy evening, we found ourselves stuck in his apartment during a power outage. Candles flickered, casting shadows on the walls, and the city outside was a blur of rain and streetlights. We sat close on the floor, wrapped in a blanket, sharing stories about childhood fears and dreams we'd almost forgotten. "You know," Eli said softly, "I never thought I'd find someone who actually gets me." I smiled, heart swelling. "Me neither. But as much as things were going well, I couldn't shake this tiny seed of doubt that crept in whenever we faced silence or when Eli's phone buzzed late at night and he'd glance at it quickly, then put it away. I didn't want to be the guy who got jealous or paranoid. But old wounds have a way of making you paranoid, even when there's no reason. One night, after a particularly quiet dinner, I finally asked, "Hey, can I ask you something?" And you gotta be honest. Eli looked up, a flicker of apprehension in his eyes. "Of course. When you don't answer my texts for hours or disappear for a bit, is it other people? Or is it just life?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Honestly, a bit of both. I'm trying to be better at this, at us, but it's hard. Sometimes I get scared I'm gonna screw things up, so I pull away instead. That hit me harder than I expected. I get it. I do the same thing." We sat there for a while, the tension hanging between us, but also this unspoken promise that we wanted to figure it out together. "I don't want to lose this," Eli said quietly, voice thick with something close to vulnerability. "Me neither. Sometimes love isn't about grand gestures or perfect timing. Sometimes it's about showing up. Even when you're scared, even when it's messy and confusing." With Eli, I was learning that maybe that was enough, and maybe, just maybe, it was the start of something worth fighting for. After that conversation, things felt a little raw between us, but in a good way. Not like the fragile kind of raw, but like when a wound starts to heal, and the skin is tender but getting stronger. We both knew we had a lot to work through, but there was this mutual understanding that neither of us was going anywhere. A couple of nights later, Eli invited me to join him for a late-night walk. The city was quieter than usual, the usual rush replaced by a calm, almost as if we'd stepped into some secret version of the place. We wandered without a particular destination, talking about everything and nothing, the kind of conversations where you reveal small, unexpected things about yourself without even realizing it. At one point, we stopped by a little park bench near the river. The water reflected the city lights in these shimmering streaks, and the air smelled like the promise of rain. Eli leaned back, looking up at the sky as if searching for something. "You ever think about how weird time is?" he asked, voice low and contemplative. "Like how it flies by and stands still at the same time?" I offered. He smiled softly. "Exactly. Our whole lives were rushing around, chasing moments. And then sometimes, in the middle of all that chaos, you find something that makes you want to pause." I looked at him, and it felt like he was speaking about us, about this strange, unexpected thing between two people who barely knew what the hell they were doing but wanted it anyway. Before I could say anything, he turned to me and gently brushed a stray lock of hair behind my ear, a little gesture that had become a quiet language between us. "I don't want to rush," he said, "but I also don't want to waste time," I nodded. Me too. No pressure, just whatever feels right. And that was the thing about Eli. He was patient without being distant, present without rushing. He made me feel like it was okay to take things slow, but that didn't mean we were stuck. We were moving forward, just at our own pace. As days turned into more weeks, we kept exploring this us thing. We had our share of awkward moments, like the time I accidentally blurted out something way too personal on a first date with his friends, or when Eli ghosted for a day because he needed space and didn't quite know how to say it. But every time, we circled back, honest conversation clearing the air like fresh rain. One Friday evening, Eli surprised me by showing up at my door with a cheap pizza and this goofy grin. "Thought you might be hungry," he said. I laughed and pulled him inside. We ate on my couch, the city humming outside, and talked about everything from conspiracy theories to our worst job experiences. At one point, we got into this ridiculous debate over which superhero was the most overrated. "Obviously, it's Batman," Eli declared. Arms crossed. "No way. Spider-Man, hands down," I countered. We ended up laughing so hard that pizza got forgotten, and the conversation turned softer, quieter. I reached for his hand, and this time he didn't hesitate. We held on like maybe it was the most natural thing in the world. That night, wrapped up in each other's arms, I realized how much Eli had become a part of my everyday life. It wasn't just the big moments, but the small ones. The texts about silly things, the way he made his coffee just how I liked it, the way he listened when I needed to vent about work. But, as with everything real and complicated, there were still challenges. One day, Eli got a call that shook him, a reminder of past pain he hadn't fully confronted. I saw the tightness in his jaw, the way his hands trembled slightly when he hung up. I didn't press, but I made sure to be there. Later that night, he opened up about an old relationship that ended badly, how it left scars that sometimes made him question if he deserved happiness. I held him close, telling him that scars don't define us. They just show we survived. "Thank you," he whispered, "for not letting me run. Always, I promised." Those moments weren't easy, but they made us stronger. They reminded me that love wasn't about perfection or fairy tales. It was about showing up, even when things got messy. One chilly Sunday, we took a spontaneous trip out of the city. Just a drive to nowhere, windows down, music playing, and no real plan. We stopped at a tiny diner in a town so small it barely had a name, sharing pancakes and laughing at our terrible singing along to old songs on the radio. Driving back, Eli reached over and took my hand. "I'm glad I found you." "Me too," I said, squeezing his fingers. It felt like one of those rare nights where the whole world seemed to fall into place, even if just for a little while. I don't know exactly where this road with Eli will lead. We might stumble, take wrong turns, or face bumps we can't see yet, but right now, I'm okay with that. Because sometimes, the best thing you can do is just keep walking together, even when you don't have all the answers. And honestly, I'm looking forward to every step. That night, as we drove back from that tiny diner, the city lights slowly creeping back into view, I felt this strange mix of comfort and excitement. Comfort because Eli was sitting next to me, fingers laced with mine, steady and warm. Excitement because, honestly, I was starting to believe that maybe this weird, unexpected thing between us wasn't just a fling or a fleeting moment. It might actually be something real. But as much as I wanted to bask in that feeling, I also knew we weren't out of the woods yet. The next week hit hard. Work ramped up with deadlines that left me glued to my desk until late, and Eli's schedule got crazier too. More shifts at the bookstore, plus some side gigs he'd picked up to make ends meet. Suddenly, finding time for each other felt like a luxury neither of us could afford. One night, after a particularly brutal day, I stared at my phone, debating whether to text him or just crash. I finally sent a quick message. "Asterix, long day, miss you." The reply came almost immediately. Asterix, "Same, can we make time this weekend?" Relief washed over me. We agreed on Saturday, but when that day rolled around, Eli canceled last minute. His voice over the phone sounded tired, apologetic, and a little defeated. "I'm sorry, man. Something came up at work. I hate bailing." "I get it," I told him, trying not to sound as disappointed as I felt. But the truth was, the canceled plans gnawed at me. It wasn't just about one night. It was the creeping feeling that maybe, beneath the surface, we were drifting apart before we'd even really started. The days that followed were a strange dance of trying to connect and accidentally stepping on each other's toes. Texts went unanswered or came late. When we did talk, there was this cautious politeness that wasn't like us. I missed the easy laughter, the silly arguments about superheroes, the way Eli's eyes would light up when he talked about a new book he'd found. Finally, one evening, I decided to be honest. I called him and said, "Hey, can we talk? Like, really talk?" We met at a quiet bar, a place with dim lighting and soft music, perfect for conversations that needed space to breathe. Eli looked tired but relieved when he saw me, like he'd been wrestling with the same feelings. "I've been thinking," I started, "about us, about how things have been kind of off lately." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I feel it too. I guess I've been scared that I'm gonna mess this up again." "Me too," I admitted. "I don't want to lose what we have, but I also don't want to pretend everything's perfect when it's not." We sat there for a while, letting the silence say what words couldn't. Eventually, Eli reached across the table and took my hand. "I want to try, really try, but I need you to be patient with me." "I can do that," I said, surprised by how firmly I meant it. It felt like a turning point, a promise to be more present, more open, even when things got messy. Because, honestly, relationships aren't just about the good times. They're about showing up when it's hard, about fighting for something that matters. The weekend after that talk, we planned a day just for us. No distractions, no work, no outside noise. We went for a hike outside the city, surrounded by trees that were just starting to show the first hints of fall. The air was crisp, and the world felt wide and full of possibility. As we walked, Eli shared more about his childhood, how he'd always felt like an outsider, how books had been his escape. I told him about my own struggles with feeling invisible in a city that often made me feel like just another face in the crowd. At the summit, we sat on a large rock, looking out over the city skyline. Eli pulled me close, resting his head on my shoulder. "Thank you," he whispered, "for sticking around." I smiled, feeling my heart swell. I'm not going anywhere. That day reminded me why this was worth it. Why the late-night laundry, the awkward first dates, the tough conversations. All of it mattered. Because with Eli, I wasn't just surviving. I was starting to live. Back in the city, as we walked home hand in hand, I realized something I hadn't fully admitted before. I was falling for him, not just the idea of him or the comfort he brought, but the whole messy, complicated, beautiful guy sitting beside me. And while the future was still uncertain, I knew one thing for sure. I wanted to see where this went, one step at a time, with Eli by my side. Because sometimes, the best love stories start in the most unexpected places. Even a basement laundry room at 2 a.m. months later. As the city settled into that quiet rhythm of early spring, Eli and I found ourselves back in the basement laundry room where it all began. It was late, though not quite 2 a.m., and the hum of the machines was the same familiar soundtrack. Only this time, we weren't strangers passing by in the dark. We were something more, something steady. I was loading the last of my clothes into the dryer when I felt Eli's hand slip into mine. He looked over, a gentle smile tugging at his lips, the kind that made all the noise and chaos of life fall away, if only for a moment. I returned the smile, feeling that same warmth I'd felt the first time he tucked a stray hair behind my ear. "I never thought I'd say this," he said softly, "but I actually don't mind doing laundry now." I laughed, squeezing his hand. It's funny how the little things change when you have someone to share them with. We sat on that bench, elbows touching, and talked about everything and nothing, jobs, future plans, that terrible movie we'd seen last week. There was comfort in the simplicity, in knowing that whatever came next, we had this. Looking at him, I realized how far we'd come, from two guys meeting by chance in the quiet dark to something real and grounded. We weren't perfect. We still had our fears and moments of doubt. But we showed up. For each other. And that was enough. Eli leaned his head on my shoulder, and I rested mine against his. The flickering, fluorescent light above us wasn't romantic in any traditional sense, but right then, it felt like the perfect backdrop. Because love isn't always grand gestures or sweeping declarations. Sometimes it's the quiet moments, the shared silences, the late-night talks, the hands held in a cold basement that build something lasting. As the dryer buzzed to signal the end of the cycle, Eli whispered, "Thanks for sticking around." I smiled, heart full. Always. And in that small, ordinary room where it all started, I knew we were exactly where we were meant to be.